Afternoon, Tim. How you doing?
Good afternoon, Shava. I'm very well. How are you?
I'm doing well. It's
Yeah.
it's a bit of a blustery day today. There's
Yeah.
a yellow weather warning for high winds. So yeah, it's certainly a bit blustery outside, but we soldier on. And this week we're going to turn our attention to something that we sort of touched upon last week when we were talking about money being heavy, and we ventured into this territory of fees and how we
Mm.
charge. And a story came up around how we first met, which was through your workshop. And one of the first things that kind of popped out to me and made me think, this guy's a little bit strange in a nice way, was the way that you presented the charging structure for the
Mm.
workshop. So yeah, I think we're gonna dive into talking about that today.
Mm.
More so me quizzing you about the the many different ways that you've charged over the past, the reason behind it, maybe even the feedback that you've got from people when they
Mm.
come on, and then you might have discussed it, because it's a very interesting aspect of the lives of many people, especially business owners, self-employed, who are in charge of setting their own fees. So I think we're gonna go down that route today.
Mm. Sounds good. Yeah. If I slightly tweak that, what we said quite early on in the last podcast is actually money isn't heavy. It's us who are heavy. That's kind of what we were talking about. So if money feels heavy or I'm acting as if it's serious, there's something in me that gets heavy or serious, maybe all the time, or maybe in relation to money. And from there, then we start talking about the possibility of still dealing with money, not
Mm.
pretending money isn't there and bills don't have to be paid, because they do. But could we do that in a playful and light way? And the step I think we were beginning to explore at the end is whether we could just be a bit more playful and experimental with money, whether it's spending money, asking for money, giving money, charging money. And that's when you said this lovely story about when we first met and you came in my workshop and I charged in what to you was a very unusual way, which was nice. I don't
Yeah.
think you'd ever said that before. And so we thought today maybe you could just, yeah, quiz me on some of the weird
Yeah.
things I do that I don't even think are weird anymore, but I guess they are. How does that sound?
Yeah, that's exactly what we want to uncover today. So
Mm, mm,
you've been doing this a long time, and actually, just being playful and light with money. Right, let's crack on to the topic at hand,
mm,
which is the ways that you've charged in the past.
mm,
What you've noticed from those different experiences, maybe even why you went down that particular route, and
mm,
any sort of
mm.
anecdotes around it. So, do you
Okay.
want to start off with?
Yeah. Well, I think what I want to say one or two things before, and then I'll get
Okay.
into examples. The first thing I want to say is it would be totally wrong to think that I'm fully liberated free, right? Some of the ways I charge have consequences. Some of the ways I position myself mean perhaps I have less business income than I otherwise might if I did certain things in very conventional ways. And I wouldn't want anyone listening to think I don't care about that at all. Stuff comes up. So sometimes I look at my total turnover and I kind of think, maybe that would be higher if I was more commercial or presented in a different way. So we can get into that actually, because I think that would be relevant. But I guess before I start to list my experiments, I want to say I'm doing this as experiments. I'm doing them to explore money, to try and practice what I preach, and because I always learn something. So I am doing it in a kind of research experimental way. It's not that I've cracked something either, that I'm totally never worry about any of it, nor that I found some great technique. I genuinely am exploring. And maybe that's what comes across to people actually when they book stuff. So, okay. I first came across Peter Koenig, who's the originator of all of this work that we're exploring, his process, 20 years ago. And over the years, obviously I've trained with people, Peter, got to know him. One of the things Peter said to me in a personal correspondence when I was asking about setting fees, he said something beautiful. He said, the more he does this work, the more he really gets into it, the less he has any idea what to charge anyone for anything. So I found that very interesting. What I took from that was the more you really get into what this work is pointing us towards, which is go for the life path or go for the deeper impulse or whatever brings you life, creativity, joy, connection, whatever we're really looking for. The more you put that at the center of a money discussion, the harder it is to have any kind of fixed idea about what the money should be.
Mm.
So I think my first insight that underlies any experiment is kind of, I don't know, I don't know. And then you notice yourself thinking, what on earth is the right figure? And you can look at compare benchmarks or the competition or what you think people will pay. And you realize how made up all of it is. So yeah, maybe I'll give some examples and it'll raise some questions. So the example that you mentioned last week was for my workshops. I don't do it so much anymore, but I used to use a formula. So people would pay and I'd suggest a formula, and it was a function of their age, their income, and a discretionary adjustment. I actually can't remember the detailed formula, but I think it was like 2.5 times your age in pounds.
Yeah.
And then 1/3 of 1% of your, I think, gross income.
It rings a bell.
Plus or minus 10 or 20. I think I made it 20%. PTs have it at 10. And so it was kind of saying, look, generally speaking, the older you get, most people accrue more assets, more material wealth in general. But obviously at a certain age, you might not have an income if you're retired or much less. So it's your age, your income, plus or minus an adjustment. And the other thing that maybe struck people was I wasn't checking.
I was going to say most people might actually even struggle to do the math on that.
I had a little Excel spreadsheet.
Oh, you did?
That helped
Okay.
people. I gave an example. So I did that, and then I'd get a real range. I have no idea if people were honest or not honest. The discretionary thing allowed people to boost it. So obviously, if you're in a certain situation, you've got 4 children, that might feel different in terms of your disposable income if you have no children, for example. What feedback did I get from that example? It paid for workshops. The money people paid collectively was never an issue for the workshops. The more tricky thing for workshops always is actually just getting the numbers of people to come. I would often be in a workshop where someone would be paying 3, 4, 5 times what the person next to them had paid. They wouldn't know. To me, that was no problem whatsoever. In fact, often I wouldn't even know that, quite realize.
So would you, once like the workshop registration had closed, would you have a look in before the workshop know, okay, well, that person paid that much? I mean, you might have had a look, but in your interaction then, was it a conscious thing that this is a high paying attendee or?
No. And maybe I can come on to another example with my coaching work that speaks more to that. No, I would know because, when I look at someone's booking form, the amount they paid is there. So just to literally get their email, I would see it, and I would be lying if I didn't say, of course I noticed. And of course, by the way, if someone had paid lots of money, I would get a momentary kind of little dopamine hit about, because it's nice to receive lots of money for your work, and it's nice to know my business is receiving money. We could dive into that. But as soon as I had that, for me, it made literally no difference at all.
I can see in that situation that being a lot of judgment taking place when people are paying different fees and then you're interacting with them, and that feels very, very challenging. Was it challenging when you first did it, or had you sort of reached a stage where you're not really judging people when they come into?
No, I had confidence. The quirkiness of it appealed to me. The playfulness of it appealed. Another thing that appealed, and this is something I use in all the different ways I charge for something, and this is something I really enjoy, is I'm conscious that it models a different approach to money. And of course, what this part of all of my work is about is let's live a different approach to money, right? Let's not just talk interesting philosophy. Let's actually change the way we are. So as a coach and a psychologist, I'm very conscious that people generally learn from what you do or what they experience, not just your words. So what I really liked was there was a congruence between this weird chap saying we could do money differently and the fact he actually is.
Right.
And it wasn't an ego thing. It was almost like, and this is a principle I think I want us to focus on and maybe encourage people to think about. If the thing I'm doing is to try and get people to really think about money differently and maybe live money differently, then even the moment they connect with buying a ticket for a workshop, we're giving a little example of that.
Which is what happened for me.
Yeah. And so because I really believe in that, it was almost like playing and having the formula was part of the workshop. As long as it worked okay for me, which it did, it was more important to me that it was conveying a quality of the workshop that was important.
And for people that haven't listened to us before, if you're listening to this for the first time, it might sound like Tim's being a bit blasé or a bit, not very sensible or business minded with his charging structure, etc. And this is where that whole idea of, I'm going to ask you, we are still sensible about money. So if it turned out that charging structure didn't work and you weren't covering your costs
or that no one was coming as a result,
you would have made some adaptations and changed it. Exactly. Totally. So I just wanted to put that out there because people listening for the first time might just not get what's going on here. So
that's really interesting because that thought doesn't even occur to me anymore. But that's interesting. I also want to say the opposite's true. It wasn't a sneaky manipulative sales technique to bring in more money.
Yeah.
Because people might think they might either think, well, that was just kind of stupid and this guy is naive.
That crossed my mind. But
other people might think, oh, that's a really good, sneaky technique. You guilt trip people. No, that's nonsense. And if anyone was trying to use this in order to maximize their income, because they'd be coming at it from the wrong intention. And that crossed your mind. That's interesting.
More, it crossed my mind from, is he testing me? Is this part of, and I got it because from reading about the workshop, I knew, because like you said, and it's very congruent, we're going to do money differently. And as soon as you sign up, this person is charging in a different way. And I thought, is he secretly going to be testing in the background to see who's paid what? And that's just me.
Of course.
That's just me, right?
And I'm aware with the formula that it does bring stuff up for people.
Yeah.
And that's also intentional. Again, I'm not trying to be provocative or mess with people's minds, but we know that money things stir people up.
Yeah.
And often that's slightly not conscious. So if you just say, okay, everyone has to pay 300 or 500 or whatever for a workshop, that emotionality is still there when people make the buying decision, but it feels more normal. But when you say, actually, you come, do the formula, you can even lie about it, implied, that emotionality becomes more conscious. They become more aware of all the funny stories they're telling themselves about money.
Nowhere to hide, in a way.
Well, it becomes more conscious. Yeah, it becomes more conscious. Did you have any more questions?
No.
Or would it be good to give more examples?
So what was the general feedback from people around that kind of pricing with the formula?
You never hear the people that don't come as a result, right? The people that go, oh my God, this guy's a trickster or a sales guy. You never get that feedback. The feedback I had was people liked it. They saw it as serious, but actually humorous. It really made them think. And most people, in terms of the feedback I received, could see, like you said, that it really linked to what we were trying to do. So generally, it was very positive. I sometimes get some technical questions about should it be my income or me and my husband's income, and then I would just give a response based on that situation. There was no hard and fast way of doing it. But generally, people liked it. And then sometimes I've done that. Now, I want to say on workshops briefly, these days I haven't used the formula, although now after this conversation, I think I might go back to it. Now I just have a very wide sliding scale. So now if people book a workshop, they're invited to pay, I think this is all pounds sterling, 250 or 350 or 450 or 550 or 650. I think.
Yeah.
something like that. And I just say, please pay whichever seems, I forget the phrase, but most appropriate to you or your organization's financial situation. And the other thing I say is, if you want to come to the workshop, but you can't afford any of these ticket prices, please email me, explain your situation, and tell me what you'd like to pay.
Mm.
And as long as someone takes the time to do that and what they say isn't completely crazy, which it never is, that's fine. So I've actually had people come on the workshop for no money, or for whatever they contribute, or for slightly less than the lowest ticket. And the other thing I say, and this is part of how I charge now, is I make it quite explicit that it's a sliding scale and why. One of the things, this is also true for my coaching work and my consulting work, when I've thought about setting fees, it's been impossible for me to find, this is my standard rate or this is rate, because I work with such a wide variety of people. I've done money work with billionaires, and I've done money workshops with voluntary community organizations working in some of the most impoverished communities in the country. It makes no sense to me to charge them the same amount, right? But what I do is I'm very explicit about it. So both on the workshop, or if I'm contracting one-to-one consulting with someone, rather than just make up a figure that fits their circumstances, I'm explicit and I say I'm very privileged to work with or share this work with a very wide range of people at different ages, different career stages, and very different ends of the financial spectrum. And therefore, if I'm charging coaching, I will say the rate I'm charging you reflects my sense of your situation. And I always invite a discussion. But certainly with my coaching, I don't think I write it like this, but I always say this. If you're paying more, please know that your work is allowing me to support people who pay less.
Interesting.
And if you're paying less, please know that you're being helped by people who are able to pay more.
Right.
And again, that's intentional because two things. One is I just want to normalize the fact that people have different amounts of money. So why wouldn't you charge them different amounts? Two, I want everyone who's drawn to the work to feel that they can engage with the work. And the third step, which is really important for me, is it's a tiny, tiny step. By helping people realize that they're either giving or receiving, it at least plants the seed of an idea that even with coaching, which can feel very personal, individual work, they're part of a wider system of people trying to change things for the better or explore money in a new way.
I mean, for me, that's actually the first time I've heard that, because we've not really talked about this before.
Yeah.
And so for me, a lot of questions come off the back of that. So you don't see charging a fee based on how you value your time. That doesn't seem to be at the forefront of your decision to charge.
Not really. I think we maybe talk about this more
In the
next week.
Yeah.
Charging for your time is very problematic and is a real limit for many, many people who provide service, consulting, coaching, etc. There are problems with that generally. Another way I would say it is, if I'm charging for my time, let's say for coaching, well, I should factor in the 30 years of meditation retreat. I should factor in the hour a day I spend meditating. I should factor in all my CPD. It's like, where do you stop? The idea that when I'm coaching someone for an hour, all they're getting is an hour. If you went down, it's preposterous. They're kind of getting me and everything I've learned for decades, a vast majority of which I've had to spend my own time and money to develop, which is a pleasure to do. So time consulting is very problematic.
Yeah, charging by the hour. Okay, that I think I'm going to save some questions around that for next week. But this idea around paying for a service and the fact that that service that you're paying for allows other people to receive the same service or a similar service that can't afford it.
Well, I would say they're able to pay less. That's how I would phrase it. Yeah.
What we would call maybe sort of cross-subsidizing.
Something.
for me, that's just a very beautiful thing to have going on, and it goes against the quite a lot of the mainstream way of
Yeah.
operating a business. And so you've got to be very conscious to operate on that kind of a model, which obviously you are. And I'm just wondering what steps, let's say you've got someone who's doing good work, but they just can't afford to always help the people that they want to help. And I think we get this in quite a few sectors.
Hmm.
Are there any steps that you took, or I know you've done a lot of work, but
Hmm.
in order to be able to say, well, actually, it's okay to charge people with more financial means more, in order that I can then help,
Yeah.
people that are less.
Yeah, it's a great question because I just written down, and we'll talk about this next week again with fee setting. In general, and still I think now, it's harder for me to charge more than it is to charge less. And I
Uh,
recognize the projections I'm caught in. So in some way, as long as at the end of the year I've got enough, and I don't earn loads and loads compared to some coaches, and that's not really my goal. But on an individual basis, it provokes me more to raise my fees than it does to offer someone reduced rate. Now I know what that's about, and the answer is yes, I am working with it, and I've had to kind of integrate my greediness, my value, all sorts of things around that in order to free myself up to do it. I've had to do some work to realize I'm still ethical and spiritual with and without charging high
yeah,
fees. So, like many people who try to do good work and help
yeah.
people, I've had a judgment or edge against some of the very high fees that some coaches and consultants
I was
charge.
I was just going to go down that route in terms
Mm,
of, so you've got billionaire clients,
yes.
and well, actually, for a 3-month coaching engagement, you
Yeah.
could charge them £10,000,
Yeah.
or
I
because there are people that do that, actually probably charge more than that in some instances.
probably.
Yeah,
I think even talking to this, and this comes back to the whole thing about play, I think it would be full of learning for me to play with, in some situations, charging much more than I do,
yeah,
actually. Yeah. So I still got work to do about that. And the point is, why would I do that? Well, yes, it's nice to earn more money, and it's nice then you can use the money in all sorts of ways. But why would I do it? I would do it because, if I'm honest talking to you now, I recognize there's an edge, there's a resistance. So there's some inner work to be done. The key for me, if I'm experimenting with money, is, as far as possible, does this experiment serve the work? So can I invite people to play with money through a formula for a money workshop? That would be a good example. Or can I invite people to think of themselves as part of a wider system when we're contracting for coaching? But also for me, do I need to charge more, charge less, do something here because I recognize I've got a resistance or a challenge or an edge? And so in a way, my choice is to charge. Yes, of course, I'm not silly with money, and yes, I want it to be available to everyone. But one of the biggest things is, have I got something to learn here? And if I have, then let me do a money experiment or a charging experiment, because I'll learn something. And talking to you right now, I'm recognizing, because I can feel it in my body and I've got some energy around it. Yeah, I'm still a little ill at ease charging in some situations more than I do. So immediately I think, well, I should try do that because I'll learn
mm.
something.
There we have it in action, right?
That's it. Yeah,
That's
I'm
the
not
work.
enlightened yet. I've still got, yeah,
That's
and
the work.
yeah, yeah. Well, maybe we do a follow-up podcast in 3 months, and I'll tell you how that experiment's gone, because immediately I can see my judgments of greed and shame, and I can see stuff. It's not as dominant as it would have been 10, 20
Yeah,
years ago, and I can talk about it, and I don't feel activated. But I'd be lying if I said
mm,
something isn't hovering around there that is a little
yeah.
impediment there.
That's really insightful. So going back to the conversation and the ways you've charged, so you've had the
Mm.
formula, then you've had the sort of the sliding scale with the
Mm.
option of, within that limit, people paying what they would be able to afford if they got in contact with you. For your coaching clients, I presume it's like maybe on a one-off or a sort of a package of working
Yeah, it's
for
usually
a
a
few
period
months,
of time. Usually
a period of time, a fixed cost. Is there ever a situation where you've told clients, or even on a workshop, well, actually, if you feel like you didn't pay enough, that at the end you can pay
Yes,
more?
I've done that. Let me give 2 or 3 examples
Okay.
of little explorations, and then we'll see. So here's some things I've done. Sometimes I've said, so for coaching, people who don't have the money but really want to do the work, and if I'm inspired by what they do, I'll offer them work, and I'll say, well, either pay later, pay when you can, make a contribution towards it. I haven't done that lots of times, because if I had 10, 20 clients like that, then I don't make a living, right? But I have done that. I coached a young climate activist in Paris. His work was fantastic, really interesting. But you could see his lifestyle was, he really didn't have money, but I wanted to coach him. So we did that on a kind of a dana, a generosity basis. And I think he's never paid me anything, but that's okay. Very happy to have helped him. Other clients I've coached, and I'm still coaching periodically, a business founder. And when we started, we set a rate that was a kind of standard professional founder rate. And then their business has run into some really tricky cash flow issues, but I love coaching them. They are brilliant, and I'm fully supportive of what they're doing in this business, hopefully to turn it around and other things. So for a while I said, well, yeah, it's okay. I want to coach you. I'm totally invested in what you're doing. I'll say, pay me if and when you can. Pay me if and when you can. And what was really interesting, and I was fine to do that because I always put the, do we want to do this work first? Is this good work to do first? And if it is, let's sort out money around it. What was really interesting is that particular person had a lot of their own stuff to work through around money, and a sense of shame about not having lots of money. They were in the world of founders, and there's often lots of money swishing around and a certain amount of bullshit about who's got money. And so my offer to them put them in a real tension, because they really appreciated it. They were very touched and they wanted to work together, but there was this tremendous sense of shame blocking them. And so we actually had to talk about that over a number of sessions. And for me, when they could finally accept, yeah, okay, we'll do that, that was brilliant. That was as rewarding as being paid £10,000 for me, because I was like, yeah, we've really done something. And, currently that person, I don't want to say, but currently that person is in a situation where they say, I still want to give you money for that coaching. Maybe they will, maybe they don't. I'm fine with that.
Do you know what? I mean, the stories like this just are sort of chiseling away at this idea that charging is all about maximizing the revenue, right? It's all that I've ever really grown up with. It's, yes, looking after clients, and you have to put your clients first, but it's about, well, what's the maximum I can earn for the work that I do? And it feels like that's not your objective. Your objective isn't it's the impact is where the work feels meaningful. It's the reward of like this interaction, which you said is worth way more. So it's almost like you're coming at it from a sort of a paradigm shift of money is important because you still need to live, you still need to do everything, but you're not putting fee earning and turnover and your business growth trajectory at the forefront metric of how you measure whatever it is that you're measuring. And I think that's really coming home to me. That's bringing up maybe like a whole new sort of topic in itself, which is this whole money life path thing, right? That essentially we've been talking about.
But you're right. My number one goal is not turnover or profit maximization. And at the same time, in my journey, because of some of my shadow and my resistance to that, I've had to learn to take that more seriously, and I am. So at the moment, with some of my work, I'm actually making choices to launch certain courses and stuff that I hope will bring in more money. And I'm doing it partly because actually the work is great and I want to be able to help more people who can't afford any of my coaching. but partly I still detect I have a shadow of a certain resistance against money making. So because it's there, I'm thinking, oh, well, I should try and make some money then. not primarily for the money, but it's like I want to explore what's that like. It's like an experiment. What happens if I try and be very commercial for a while? Because it's an edge for me. Let me give a couple more examples. Number one, sometimes I choose to charge more because it's appropriate for the work. So I want to emphasize to people that experimenting with money isn't just saying, well, you don't have to pay me now, or you pay me later, or pay what you like. That can be great. That can serve the work. But sometimes it's necessary to charge more than you would normally because it's necessary for the work. So, for example, when I was invited to run a money workshop for millionaires and billionaires in this group, I made up a figure that was at that time at least twice what I'd been paid for any other workshop. It still didn't feel extortionate or ridiculous, but I was like, well, why to do that? Why would I do that? Not because I was a greedy grabber thinking, well, they can pay me, but I was thinking, okay, these guys, and they were all guys, are operating in the world where if you don't charge fairly high fees, you are not taken seriously.
Yeah.
So therefore, to make this work legitimate and to get them to take me seriously, I need to find a number that they can respect.
Right.
So I charged them more, not because I needed to boost the number, but that was the right number. So again, it was a play, it was an experiment in service of what am I trying to do here? What's the connection or the situation? And the funny thing is they did try and haggle me down.
Well.
I think they're the only group who've ever haggled me down. That was very funny for me, actually.
Yeah.
That was really funny. And the final thing I want to say, and then maybe, Sheba, you've got some questions, is sometimes I've talked about payment in terms of energy exchange. Now, this links to a whole body of other work I do called mandala work. And if people are listening and interested, they can find on my website a whole section on mandala. But mandala talks about an exchange of energy as one of the fundamental dynamics, actually in all situations in the world. Question, response, giving, receiving. Energy exchange works. You do your work, you receive, well, maybe money, but hopefully other things, learning, enjoyment, stimulation. And sometimes I've run things putting energy exchange at the center and said money is one form of energy exchange and there are many others. And you could bring anything, things, you could offer me support, encouragement, feedback, just your time coming to the workshop is energy. And what I want to say about framing it as energy exchange is some of the most memorable things I've received have come when I invited energy exchange that includes money, but not just money. So I still remember being paid for a workshop in olive oil. Now, I don't know the cash value of what I received. I don't know. And probably it was at the low end of what I might get. But I remember being incredibly touched. This person was an entrepreneur and they were exploring this very interesting project with olive oil. And when I think about that, I remember the person, the situation, the olive oil, more than I remember being paid money by most people.
Yeah.
There's something in the story. I was recently part paid in a workshop in homegrown honey from someone who came on a workshop, and at that time they were closing down their business. They said, I really don't have much money, but they participated with energy. They brought honey. Subsequently, maybe partly as a result of the workshop, they said, I've got a new commission. I can pay you this amount of money. So then I got some money and the honey. But the honey, again, I remember it. So I've been paid in a number of ways with kind of gifts or exchanges. And what I want to say about that is somehow when I'm paid that way, the story and the person and the situation and the object often feel more meaningful than the money. And I'm not against money and I'm not disparaging money, because if everyone paid me in honey,
you can't pay your mortgage with olive oil.
Exactly. It's not great. But there is something in that. And so there's something about how we use a transaction to deepen a sense of a connection with a person or a situation that's very mysterious, but well worth people exploring. So I
Mm.
think that's run through many of the different things I've done over the
Yeah.
years. Not all of them actually, but some of them.
And I'm just thinking what you were saying, and there's a lot of stuff going on in my head, but in the world of financial services, for example, we can't service people that don't have a lot of money, because generally the fees that we would charge, they just don't make sense for someone with a very small amount to be paying thousands of pounds, because that money actually would just be better off them using it for something like an emergency fund, or whatever it is that would be at the top of their list at that moment in time. And I'm going to use this phrase that we've, not delivering enough value for money. And I think that's going to come in next week's conversation about charging based on value, and how do you even determine that? And we've spoken about that before. But actually, what would be very interesting is, well, I do some pro bono work. And the only reason why I'm able to do some pro bono work and give, my time at the mosque to do financial education is because I earn, you know, a fairly good living from my clients that pay me.
Mm.
Now, that in a way is quite similar to, people are paying me, and because I get paid well from this set of clients over here, which is my main business, I can choose, to take some time out of my diary to go and help these people over here.
Mm.
It's whether I then communicate that
Yeah.
message to those people and say, look, you're paying me a fee, but you do realize that your fee actually helps me to promote financial education and wellness, and maybe the money in life work or whatever it is. And that's quite interesting. I wonder how that would be received.
Well, there's an experiment that
It's an
takes us full
experiment.
circle. There's something
Yeah.
to be played with there and experimented there. And yeah, I love that, because as often it's about changing our story and maybe other people's or our
Yeah.
clients' stories about money. I think so much of the modern industrial money story that isn't healthy makes us see ourselves as very separate and disconnected and private. This goes back to, it's my money, it's in a bank, it's private, I worry, we don't talk about it.
Yeah.
It emphasizes our sense of isolation and disconnection. So maybe finding a way to let everyone there involved know, actually your fees are helping people in the mosque. Or even formalize it. You could even play for a while and say, well, here are my fees. And it's totally voluntary. But if you would like to contribute an additional 0.1 or 0.01 or whatever percent, it goes into this fund. And this fund is for people who need financial advice who can't pay, or for people in crisis. Or there's many things you could do. Partly that would maybe create a pot of money that's helpful, but it would also change people's sense of their relationship to their money and fees and maybe each other. And
Yeah.
I would say that's worth doing as well, from my perspective.
Yeah. Another experiment. Well, we both seem to have come away with some experiments to do. Is there anything you want to say before we wrap up? I know we've been a bit longer than our usual episodes, but I think it was worthwhile.
Well, only that we'll look in more detail about how other people might set fees, or some basic tools and techniques, I think, next time. And also to say, people listening to this, you might think, well, I'm employed, I don't get to set fees. So I hope it's been interesting, but also you're buying things the whole time, and that's the other side of this. So there's always the possibility, whether you think you're selling or buying or setting fees or not, to ask yourself the same question about, am I focused on the number? And could there be anything in the conversation, the story, how I engage with the number? Maybe I offer more or I ask to pay less. The key is, when I'm not focused on the number, there may be lots of other things going on, whether I'm buying or selling, that I would really like to support or augment.
And I think we do this a lot in our day to day, because there's a lot of people that will prefer to shop locally and support their local grocer or butcher, rather than going to one of the main supermarkets. So people are actually quite conscious about this idea of who they're giving to, and what that's helping someone in your local community, for example, sustain them and support their family, and etc. So we are making these decisions
all the time. I want to end with one quick story. Many years ago, I was traveling in London, and I was at Paddington Station, and I was about to get my train home to Bristol, and I had for dinner Yo Sushi. There used to be a little sushi place there. And I left enough time to pay and get on my train. But there was a problem with the machine and there was a long queue. The machine was working, it was taking a long time. And I realized if I stay to pay, I am not going to get my train. So I walked up to the manager and I looked them in the eye and I said, look, I don't have time to pay you and get my train. I'm going to go now, but I promise you, next time I'm in London, I will pay you the money. And I just walked off. And they didn't know what to think. But the next time I was in London, I went up there and I explained and I paid my bill. So I don't know what the meaning of that story is, other than whether you're buying or selling, there are opportunities to play and stay in relationship everywhere. And I think it would be a wonderful thing if more people tried to do that. I wasn't trying to manipulate. I wasn't trying to get a free dinner. In fact, it was very important to me that I paid and I respected the situation. But I also didn't want to miss my train.
Yeah. Well, I think we end there. I'll see you next time, Tim.
See you next week. Cheers, Shabba. Bye-bye.